Within the next 30 to 60 days, you are going to get the halving, and they're going to cut the daily supply in half. You're going to get selling exhaustion by GBTC, and then guess what happens to price? This is not a trading product. This is a savings product. Look, if you're sitting there going, "Oh my God," I'm having sleepless nights because Bitcoin went from 74 to 66. Just absolutely wait until Bitcoin goes to 105 and drops back down to 70. Right? Like that would be a completely and utterly normal correction in the Bitcoin markets, and you've got to get used to it. If you're not used to it, you're not going to hold the asset, and if you're not going to hold the asset, then what's the point of it at the end of the day, right? You've caused yourself a tax liability, and that's it. So I would absolutely focus at this point. If you are one of these people who is sitting here going, "Oh my God, I hope we have a good week next week," step away from the Bitcoin, do some more work, understand what Bitcoin is, understand what you're buying, understand that it's not a trade, understand what's going on here so that you can manage your psychology better when Bitcoin is dumping. Because anything that goes up, 40%, 50% in the space of 2 or 3 weeks is going to have some corrections along the way. So this is completely and utterly normal, and I think it's important for new people to understand this. So I wanted to do a video on this, and it's interesting because I was thinking, like, what could I say to make it feel better? And I think I came to the conclusion that I can't really say anything to make it feel better. That is the price that you have to pay in order to earn the rewards that Bitcoin's volatility is going to give you. And if you cannot handle that, and you cannot afford to pay that price, you will have your Bitcoin taken from you, because now you've got big players in the game like BlackRock, Fidelity, everyone else, who know how to move the price around. If they've got, listen, BlackRock's got 2 departments in its business, right? You've got the asset management department and the ETF iShares team, right? If I've got a few $1 billion that I need to move into Bitcoin on the iShares, on the asset management side, and the iShares team calls me and says, "Okay, we're ready for your next tranche," or I call them and say, "Hey, we're ready to send the next tranche of money," and they say, "Wait a second, the sell orders just really took off and looks like the price is going to go down. You might want to hold off on sending us that money." Then I'm going to say, "Okay, cool, no problem. Let me know once the sell orders thin out," right? Because if you got a lot of sell orders and we buy that, it's not going to start moving the price up. There's a chance that the price could still slip further. So you want the market to buy up the thin sell, make the sell orders thinner. Then you come in and start chipping away at that, and then you ride the price up again. And if I'm BlackRock, that's exactly what I'm doing, right? I'm going to wait until the market gets its emotions out the way. I might even be figuring out how to cause some of these crashes by using futures, using a spot in different places, etc., etc. I might be figuring out exactly how to cause some of these crashes so that I can scoop up the Bitcoin of the person that's like, "Oh my God, it went from 74 down to 65. I need to get out," right? A lot of people watching are in their first cycle at this point. I'm noticing the conversation be the same, right? So one of the things that's different is that when you're going through your first cycle, the conversation I hear from people is Bitcoin's going to $1 million. We're going to dollar penny per sat parity. We're going to, be buying things in Bitcoin. We're going to be doing all this shit. Bitcoin's going to take over the world in short order, etc., etc. And as you guys know, my thought process, and I heard the same thing when I was going through my first cycle of Bitcoin. I didn't really jump on that bandwagon, but I think that's more so because of my previous investing experience and understanding how markets work. But even I was going along with a lot of it, right? Like, oh my God, corporations. That was my one. I was like, corporations are going to buy Bitcoin in droves. All these corporations are going to have Bitcoin, etc., etc. And of course, then they didn't, right? And I don't think, I think MicroStrategy is a one and done, and I think it's an amazing one and done, and it's a huge opportunity, and congratulations to all the people that profited from that, especially Michael Saylor, absolute legend. But what you realize is that hysteria of bullishness is the first cycle talk, right? Because the first time you've really been exposed to an asset, you've got a great community around you, etc., etc. Now in my second cycle, I'm no longer worried about that, right? I'm more worried about, the current position of Bitcoin, which is a store of value asset. and how is it going to further develop to be a store of value asset, and what needs to be done in order for it to develop into a store of value asset. And the conversations that I have with people who are in their second cycle and beyond, that's the question, right? Because you've gotten over the initial honeymoon period with Bitcoin, which is the first cycle. And then once you, I mean, just to put this into perspective, like I've, ridden Bitcoin from $5,000 up to $64,000, down to $35,000, up to $69,000, down to $15,500, and up to $74,000. And that's in the space of, 3 years, 4 years. So it is a roller coaster of a ride. Um, and in that first cycle, you're really looking for conviction. So you're trying to hype yourself up about what this asset is going to be and how it can be. But here's the reality of it. One of the things I'm noticing is that people who are in their first cycle at this point are calling me during this dip period, going, I hope we have a good week next week. Oh my God, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things to realize is it would be completely and utterly normal for Bitcoin to experience 4 to 6 35% dips before we hit the final all-time high. A 35% dip for Bitcoin is absolutely nothing, right? This is it's not even something to discuss. That's just what it is. That's just how it works, because the asset is volatile. And right now you're sitting at a 9 to 16% dip, and people are losing their minds. It's like, no, the worst thing I want to happen is people that have bought Bitcoin now, and because the cycle started moving a little bit earlier than the last one, you sit there and go, okay, I'm going to be shaken out of my position because I can't handle the volatility that's being generated by the asset. But Bitcoin is a volatile asset, and you have to mentally prepare yourself for those swings that are happening. If you're worried about Bitcoin, dropping from 70 to 75,000 to somewhere between, 55 and 60,000, you've got to question your allocation and make sure you've allocated appropriately, because Bitcoin will do that without taking a breath, right? There's not going to be any problem for Bitcoin to make that correction and come springing back up. That is absolutely normal for Bitcoin. And if you're sitting there going, oh my God, I'm feeling stressed because Bitcoin's down to $66,000, right now from $74,000, you have no idea what you're in for. You have no idea the ride that you are in for. And the people that were in the first cycle, or whatever your first cycle was, you've been through that. You've been trained in the volatility of Bitcoin. And so now you're used to it and you're waiting for it. So, and again, volatility works both sides. There can be a time where we can run straight $30,000 in 2 weeks, right? Hit 100,000 and come back down to 80. That's a 20% correction. That would be almost 50% of the normal corrections that happen in all of Bitcoin's previous bull market runs here. So this is it's quite remarkable that I'm already speaking to people who are terrified of these dips that Bitcoin is going through, and I really wanted to do this video here to drum in that this is normal. These little dips and things like that that's going on here, where we've just barely broken the all-time high. This cycle is so early, it's unbelievable. We've got ETFs rolling through. We've got RIAs starting to roll through in the next few months. There's a lot going on here that is quite positive for the next year for Bitcoin. Derivatives markets opening up, everything else. So, there's so many people that are basically saying, hey, I think Bitcoin's going to $1 million, and then dumping it when it goes from 73 down to 66, right? Like that's not the right mindset that you should be approaching this asset with. At the end of the day, people who bought real estate in London, in Manhattan, in New York, in LA, like all these places, they didn't dump it when the market went down, right? They didn't dump it. The only reason why it's harder with Bitcoin for the average retail person is that most retail people are focused on price, not value. And the reality is that the value of the asset actually went up as soon as Wall Street got involved, but everyone's still focused on price. And when you're focused on price, you will let go of an asset, and BlackRock and Fidelity and all these other asset managers will do everything possible to try and get your Bitcoin almost at any price. I think up until $1 million, they will do anything possible to shake you out of your position. And if they see that you've got a position in place and there's a lot of leverage long positions going on, they're going to figure out how to move the price in the opposite direction to screw every single one of those people. and take as much Bitcoin as they can. So the key thing here is to hold, right, or to hodl, and to understand that price volatility is part of the asset. Understand what the overlying, the background macro play is here, so you understand what's going on there, and coach yourself to realizing that this is completely normal for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is completely and utterly expected to 4 to 6, 30% corrections, 35% corrections on its way to its all-time high, and these numbers are only going to get better and better and better, right? What I mean by better is more shit scary, because at the end of the day, when Bitcoin goes from 100,000 down to 70,000, I'm looking to see what happens there. And I've noticed this because what happens with retailers is that the way that our psychologies are trained is that if I get into something at 70 and it goes to 100, in my mind, I made 30,000, right? So that when it comes back down to 70, I've now lost 30,000. So we book the profit in our minds without actually executing the trade to sell the Bitcoin to generate that profit, and then it screws you because you're now dealing with loss and psychology of loss and all this other shit that's going on in your head. And you just got to understand that, that's completely normal for Bitcoin. You've got entities in place that can and will move the price against you in order to suck up your Bitcoin. And it's up to you to stay in the market, understand what's going on, understand the underlying trends, understand all of that. And that's why, part of the reason why I'm continuing to do this channel, because I want people to understand what those trends are overall. So you can see, okay, these ETFs are still on track to buy 100,000 Bitcoin within the next 30 days. Like that's a lot of Bitcoin coming off the market in the next 30 days. If any other capital doesn't come on board, that is. So yeah, this is completely and utterly normal. Stop panicking. Subscribe to the channel as well, because if you're sitting there going, oh my God, I'm panicking, da 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 da, you need to understand how markets work. So you got to treat it out how it is. But overall, for this coming week, I think we're going to see a trend reversal in selling pressure. I think all of the big sellers of GBTC are almost done, if not done. And I think we're going to see a reversal in buying pressure now. We've gone from selling pressure to buying pressure. But we'll see what happens, because ultimately, there are always only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.